We called it just Nutella and refused to go. My dad's face fell, but he handed me the keys without another word. 3 months later, I found the magazine, his handwritten notes, his plans to make that trip the memory of a lifetime. Now he sits quietly at every family gathering, careful not to suggest anything spontaneous. And every time I try to apologize, all he says is, "It doesn't matter anymore." But it does. It always did. And he ceased. He never saw me realizing it too late. I've spent my entire life trying to be the reasonable one, the rational one, the one who makes sensible decisions based on logic rather than impulse. That's been my identity since childhood, the practical child, the one who thinks things through. It served me well through school, through college, through my career. But I never realized how this trait, this need to be practical and efficient, would eventually tear my family apart over something as simple as a jar of hazelnut spread. Growing up, my father was always the dreamer. While my mother kept the household functioning with schedules and budgets, my father was the one who would wake us up at 3 a.m. to watch meteor showers, who would take sudden detours on road trips because he spotted something interesting in the distance. As children, my brother and I would roll our eyes but go along with it. Those spontaneous moments became our most treasured memories. The time we found that hidden waterfall, the abandoned lighthouse we explored during a storm, the small town festival we stumbled upon where we ended up dancing until midnight. But as we grew older, our patience for these adventures dwindled. We became busier, more focused on our own paths. My brother and I moved abroad for our careers, and family time became precious, calculated, and increasingly rare. Every visit home became a carefully planned affair, with time parceled out between obligations and relaxation. I didn't notice the shift at first. I didn't see how my father's suggestions for spontaneous adventures were met with less enthusiasm and more frustration from us. I didn't recognize the disappointment in his eyes when we'd choose to stick to our itineraries rather than follow his whims. I was too busy being an adult, too concerned with maximizing efficiency, too focused on what made sense. The trip to the city was supposed to be special. My brother and I had synchronized our visits home, and our parents suggested this family trip. A family event in a city neither my brother nor I had visited before seemed perfect. We could combine obligation with exploration. 2 days, that's all we had. 2 precious days to create memories before we would fly back to our separate lives, thousands of miles apart. The first day was wonderful despite our mild illnesses. We rented a car and drove around the city, taking in the sights, stopping at landmarks, eating at well-reviewed restaurants. It was pleasant, controlled, predictable. When my father mentioned having something special planned for the next day, I assumed it would be a famous museum or perhaps a renowned local restaurant. Something that would fit neatly into our remaining hours before we needed to catch our flight. I never expected it to be a 5-hour journey for a jar of hazelnut spread. "We'll drive to this small town," my father said, his eyes bright with excitement as we stood beside our rental car the next morning. "There's this place where you can fill your own jar of their special hazelnut spread. It's like Nutella, but so much better. We can watch them make it fresh." I thought he was joking. My brother and I exchanged glances, waiting for the punchline. But it never came. My father was completely serious, already pulling up the route on his phone. "Dad," I said carefully, "that's a 5-hour drive, and we only have 5 hours before we need to head to the airport." "Exactly," he replied, as if this timing made perfect sense. "We'll spend the drive there talking, seeing the countryside. The road passes through beautiful green valleys. Then we'll get the spread and head straight to the airport." I felt the familiar tension building in my chest, the frustration of someone not seeing what seemed painfully obvious to me. We would spend our entire final day of this trip in a car, just to watch someone pour hazelnut spread into a jar. We would miss all the places in the city we hadn't yet seen. It made no logical sense. "But there's so much we haven't explored here yet," my brother pointed out, his voice strained from his cold. "The botanical gardens, that historic district everyone recommends. You can see botanical gardens anywhere," my father dismissed with a wave of his hand. "This hazelnut spread is unique. It's an experience." I felt a headache forming. This was so typical. My father's impulsive ideas versus practical reality. I was tired, still feeling sick, and the thought of being trapped in a car for 5 hours, only to rush to the airport afterward seemed like torture. "Dad, it just doesn't make sense," I insisted. "We'd be spending our entire day in the car for Nutella." "It's not just Nutella," he said, his voice rising slightly. "It's about the journey, the experience, Seeing another city. We won't even see the city, my brother argued. We'd arrive, get the spread, and leave immediately for the airport. The argument escalated. My father became increasingly insistent, his face flushing as he tried to convince us of the value of this spontaneous detour. My brother and I stood our ground, equally determined to spend our remaining time in a way that seemed reasonable to us. My mother, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally stepped in. Maybe we should just stay in the city, she suggested softly. The kids are still feeling under the weather. I saw something shift in my father's expression. A flicker of hurt quickly masked by resignation. Fine, he said after a moment of heavy silence. We'll do what you want. He handed me the car keys and walked to the passenger side door. As he got in, I caught a glimpse of his face in the side mirror. Deflated, disappointed, defeated. Something twisted in my stomach, but I brushed it aside. We were making the sensible choice. The logical choice. We were being adult. The rest of the day was pleasant enough on the surface. We visited the botanical gardens, toured the historic district, had lunch at a charming cafe. But there was an undercurrent of tension that couldn't be ignored. My father went through the motions, nodding at appropriate moments, offering occasional comments, but the enthusiasm was gone. He was simply there, physically present, but emotionally distant. I told myself he was being childish, sulking because he didn't get his way. I told myself we had made the right decision. I ignored the nagging feeling in my gut that maybe, just maybe, we had missed something important. The plane ride home was quiet. My father sat next to my mother, across the aisle from my brother and me. He slept most of the way, or pretended to. I busied myself with a book, tried to ignore the lingering discomfort. When we arrived home, I expected things to return to normal. A good night's sleep, and surely my father would be back to his usual self in the morning. But he wasn't. The next day, and the day after that, there was a subtle but unmistakable change in his demeanor. He was polite, functional, but the spark was missing. Our conversations became surface level, devoid of the warmth and connection that had always characterized our relationship. I tried to dismiss it. Adults disagreed all the time. It was natural. It was normal. He would get over it. But then came the conversation with my mother. She found me in the kitchen late one night, making tea to help with my lingering cold symptoms. You should apologize to your father, she said without preamble. I nearly dropped my mug. Apologize? For what? Being reasonable, my mother sighed, a deep, weary sound that made her seem suddenly older. That trip meant a lot to him. He'd been planning it for months. The city trip? I thought it was a last-minute idea. No, not the city. The hazelnut spread place. He read about it in a travel magazine. He's been saving the article for over a year, waiting for a time when both you and your brother would be home. I felt the first stirrings of unease, but it was just Nutella. It wasn't about the spread, she said, her voice quiet but firm. It was about creating a memory with his children before they flew away again. Something unique that you would all remember. We could have created memories in the city, I argued, but my voice lacked conviction. You don't understand, she continued. Your father sees how grown up you've both become, how independent. He's proud, but he also feels unnecessary. This trip was his way of still being the dad who shows his kids something new and exciting. The unease grew, spreading through my chest, but it wasn't practical. We only had 5 hours. Not everything valuable is practical, my mother replied. Sometimes the most impractical moments become our most cherished memories. She left me then, with my cooling tea and my growing discomfort. I tried to shake off her words, to reassure myself that we had made the logical choice. But the unease remained, settling into my bones like a chill I couldn't shake. My brother, in contrast, remained convinced we had done nothing wrong. If we had gone along with his plan, we would have spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing. He insisted when I tentatively brought up my mother's suggestion that we apologize. We made the right call. But had we? The question haunted me through the remaining days of our visit. I watched my father go about his routines, reading the newspaper, tending to the garden, preparing meals, all with a quiet efficiency that felt wrong somehow. The playfulness that had always defined him was subdued, replaced by a careful politeness that broke my heart a little more each day. It wasn't until the night before my flight back, my brother had already left 2 days earlier, that I finally understood the true weight of what had happened. I was in the attic, looking for an old book I wanted to take with me, when I stumbled upon a box labeled Family Adventures. Curious, I opened it. Inside were mementos from all those spontaneous trips my father had taken us on throughout our childhood. Ticket stubs, pressed flowers, maps with routes highlighted in bright marker, Polaroid photos of us laughing in unexpected places. And beneath it all, a travel magazine with a dog-eared page. I pulled it out, my heart already knowing what I would find. The article was titled Europe's Hidden Food Experiences. And there it was, a 2-page spread about a small-town shop where visitors could fill their own jars with freshly made hazelnut spread, watching as the artisans ground the nuts and blended the chocolate before their eyes. The margins of the article were filled with my father's handwriting. Take the kids when they visit. Make a day of it. They'll remember this forever. My throat tightened as I ran my fingers over his notes. He had planned this experience with such care, such hope. And we had dismissed it without a second thought, reducing it to just Nutella, something trivial and unworthy of our precious time. I remembered then all the times throughout my childhood when my father's seemingly random detours had led to our most treasured family moments. I remembered how he would always say, "It's not the destination, it's the journey," and how I'd grown to find that phrase increasingly irritating as I became more focused on efficiency and outcomes. I thought about how rarely we were all together now, how the opportunities for creating family memories were becoming increasingly scarce. My brother and I lived in different countries, our visits home brief and infrequent. My parents were getting older. Time was slipping away from us, and here we were, squandering it over practicalities. What would have been so terrible about spending 5 hours in a car with my family? We could have talked, shared stories, seen new landscapes. Maybe the hazelnut spread would have been amazing, or maybe it would have been disappointing. But we would have had the experience together. We would have honored my father's excitement, his desire to share something unique with us. Instead, we had prioritized checking items off a tourist list, places that would still exist long after this opportunity had passed, places we could visit anytime, with anyone. We had chosen the predictable over the unique, efficiency over connection. We had chosen wrong. I sat in that attic surrounded by the physical evidence of my father's love for adventure, for creating special moments with his children, and I felt ashamed. We had grown so focused on being adult, on being practical, that we had forgotten how to be a family. We had forgotten how to say yes to joy, even when it came disguised as inconvenience. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I had prioritized practicality over connection, not just on this trip, but throughout my adult life. How many moments had I missed because they didn't fit neatly into my schedule? How many opportunities for joy had I dismissed because they weren't efficient enough? I thought about my relationship with my father, how it had shifted over the years from adoration to tolerance, from excitement to obligation. When had I stopped seeing his spontaneity as magical and started seeing it as an inconvenience? When had I started measuring our time together in hours and minutes rather than in moments and memories? The realization was painful. I had become so caught up in my own independence, improving my adulthood through practical decision-making, that I had failed to recognize the gift my father was trying to offer. He wasn't trying to waste our time. He was trying to preserve our connection in the face of growing distance. He was trying to be my father in the only way he knew how, by showing me something new, something unexpected, something that might bring a spark of childlike wonder back into my overly structured adult life. And I had rejected it. Rejected him. All in the name of being sensible. I thought about my mother's words. Not everything valuable is practical. How true that was, and how easily I had forgotten it. The most valuable things in life, love, connection, joy, wonder, rarely made practical sense. They couldn't be scheduled or optimized. They simply had to be experienced, often at the expense of efficiency. As the night deepened, I began an inventory of my life. All the times I had said no to unexpected opportunities because they didn't align with my plans. All the moments I had rushed through because I was focused on the next item on my agenda. All the connections I had allowed to weaken because maintaining them required too much effort. I thought about my friendships, how I'd let so many drift away because regular communication didn't fit into my busy schedule. I thought about past relationships that had ended because I couldn't accommodate another person's spontaneity, their desire for unplanned moments. I thought about how rarely I allowed myself to simply be present, to experience life without analyzing its practical value. And I thought about my father, this man who had always tried to show me that there was magic in the unexpected, joy in the journey. This man who, despite my growing coldness, still wanted to share special experiences with me. This man who had been planning for over a year to take his children on a 5-hour drive for hazelnut spread, not because of the spread itself, but because he thought it would be a memory we would cherish. The weight of this realization was crushing. I had been wrong, so wrong, and I had no idea how to make it right. My flight was scheduled for early afternoon the next day. I came downstairs for breakfast to find my father already at the table, newspaper open, coffee cooling beside him. He looked up when I entered, offered a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sleep well?" he asked, folding the newspaper neatly. "Not really," I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee. He nodded but didn't ask why. This was our new dynamic. Polite, surface level, safe. No vulnerability, no real connection. Just two adults sharing space, careful not to disrupt each other's boundaries. I wanted to say something then, to apologize, to explain that I had found the magazine article, that I understood now what that trip had meant to him. But the word stuck in my throat. It felt too late, too inadequate. A simple "I'm sorry" couldn't undo the hurt I had caused, couldn't bridge the distance that had grown between us. So instead, we ate breakfast in near silence, exchanging only the most necessary of words. My mother joined us briefly before heading out for a morning appointment, giving me a meaningful look that I couldn't quite interpret. Was she encouraging me to speak up? Warning me not to make things worse? I couldn't tell. After breakfast, my father retreated to his study, and I began packing for my departure. The house felt heavy with unspoken words, with missed opportunities. I moved through my childhood bedroom, collecting my belongings, while downstairs my father typed away at his computer, both of us carefully maintaining the silence between us. As the morning progressed, I felt increasingly desperate to break through this wall, to find some way to reach him before I left. But every time I rehearsed the words in my mind, they sounded hollow, insufficient. What could I possibly say that would make up for my dismissal of something that had clearly meant so much to him? The clock ticked forward, my departure time approaching. I finished packing, brought my suitcase downstairs. My father emerged from his study, car keys in hand. "Ready to go?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. This was it. I was leaving without having said anything meaningful, without having made any attempt to repair what had been broken. I was choosing silence over vulnerability, just as I had chosen practicality over connection. The drive to the airport was excruciating. We made small talk about the weather, about my flight details, about whether I had packed everything I needed. Not once did we mention the city trip, the argument, the tension that still lingered between us. Not once did we acknowledge the elephant in the room. As we approached the airport, I felt panic rising. I was running out of time. Once I boarded that plane, this moment would be lost. I would return to my life abroad, and this fracture between us would become our new normal. The thought was unbearable. We pulled up to the departure terminal. My father put the car in park, turned to me with that same careful smile. "Have a safe flight," he said. "Call when you land." I nodded, reached for the door handle, and then stopped. "I found the magazine article," I blurted out. "The one about the hazelnut spread place." My father went very still, his hands tightening almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "Oh," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I saw your notes in the margins," I continued, the words rushing out now. "I saw how long you've been planning it," he shrugged, a small dismissive gesture that broke my heart. "It doesn't matter." "But it does," I insisted. "It matters, and I was wrong. We were wrong, my brother and I, to dismiss it the way we did." My father was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Then he sighed, a deep, weary sound. "You made the practical choice," he said finally. "That's what adults do." "No," I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "That's what people who are afraid do. Afraid of wasting time, afraid of being disappointed, afraid of looking foolish." I swallowed hard, afraid of connecting. He turned to look at me then, his expression guarded but curious. "I've been thinking a lot about all those spontaneous trips you took us on when we were kids," I continued. "The meteor shower viewings, the random detours to places not on any map. At the time, they often seemed inconvenient, impractical. But they're my favorite memories now. They're the stories I tell people when they ask about my childhood." Something flickered in my father's eyes, a spark of the warmth that had been missing these past days. "I forgot that," I admitted. "I forgot that the best moments in life rarely make practical sense. I forgot that connection happens in the spaces between plans, in the willingness to say yes to something unexpected." I took a deep breath. "I forgot how to be your daughter." My father's facade cracked then, just slightly. You were being an adult, he said, but his voice held less conviction now. I was being rigid, I corrected. I was so concerned with making the most of our limited time that I missed the whole point of that time. To be together, to create memories, to connect. I reached across the console, placed my hand over his. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. He looked down at our hands, then back up at me. The wall behind his eyes was crumbling, revealing the hurt beneath. I just wanted to give you both something special, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Something you couldn't get anywhere else. I know, I said, my own eyes filling with tears. And we threw it back in your face. We reduced it to just Nutella, when it was never about the spread at all. A tear escaped, rolling down my cheek. My father reached out, brushed it away with his thumb, a gesture so familiar from my childhood, so absent in recent years, that it nearly undid me. Next time I'm home, I promised, we'll go. 5 hours, 10 hours, I don't care. We'll make that trip. My father shook his head. It's not about that specific place. It was about having an adventure together, about being open to the unexpected. Then we'll have different adventure, I said. Something spontaneous, something that makes no practical sense at all. Just you and me, and my brother too, if I can talk some sense into him. A small, genuine smile tugged at the corners of my father's mouth. I'd like that. The airport security line beckoned, my departure time approaching. But for once, I wasn't anxious about the schedule. For once, the practical concerns, checking in on time, finding my gate, boarding in the correct order, seemed insignificant compared to this moment of reconnection. I have to go, I said reluctantly. My father nodded. I know. I leaned across the console, wrapped my arms around him in a real hug, not the brief, obligatory embrace we'd exchanged in recent years, but a true connection. He held me tightly, his familiar scent of wood and coffee enveloping me. I love you, Dad, I whispered. I love you too, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. As I pulled away, I saw the spark had returned to his eyes, that gleam of mischief and wonder that had defined him throughout my childhood. It was subtle, just a flicker, but it was there. The bridge between us, damaged but not destroyed, was beginning to mend. 3 months have passed since that day at the airport. 3 months of reflection, of reassessment, of intentional change. I called my father as soon as I landed, and we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Not just about schedules and health updates and weather reports, but about feelings and dreams and fears. About the distance that had grown between us, not just physically but emotionally. About how my need to be efficient had overshadowed my capacity for connection. He listened with a patience that humbled me, then shared his own perspective, how he had watched his adventurous children become serious adults, how he had struggled to find his place in our increasingly structured lives, how he had hoped that one final spontaneous journey might rekindle something that seemed lost. That conversation was the first of many. We now speak weekly, not just brief check-ins, but real discussions that often stretch for hours. Sometimes my mother joins, sometimes my brother, who, after much reflection, eventually came to his own realization and offered his own apology. But often, it's just my father and I, rebuilding what had been damaged through years of prioritizing practicality over presence. I've begun to examine other areas of my life, with this new perspective as well. I've reached out to old friends I had allowed to drift away, reigniting connections that had withered through neglect. I've become more open to spontaneity in my daily routine, saying yes to last-minute invitations that once would have seemed like inconvenient disruptions to my carefully planned schedule. Most significantly, I've started to question my reflexive prioritization of efficiency over experience. When faced with a choice, I now ask myself not what is the most practical option, but what might bring joy, what might create a meaningful memory, what might deepen connection. The results have been transformative. My life feels richer, more textured, more alive. Yes, it's also less predictable, less efficient in conventional terms. I sometimes arrive late to appointments because I stopped to help a stranger, or I miss deadlines because I chose to accept an unexpected invitation. My productivity, as measured by tasks completed or goals achieved, has perhaps decreased, but my sense of fulfillment, of genuine connection, of presence in my own life has expanded beyond measure. I feel more myself than I have in years, not just the efficient, practical adult I had become, but also the curious, open-hearted child I once was. Both parts of me, integrated at last. As for my father, the change in our relationship has been profound. The careful politeness that had characterized our interactions has been replaced by genuine warmth, by playful banter, by deep conversations that stretch late into the night. The wall between us, built brick by brick through years of dismissed suggestions and prioritized practicalities, has crumbled. Next month, I'm going home for a visit, not for any special occasion, not because it's convenient or efficient, but simply because I want to spend time with my parents. My brother will join us for part of the trip, and my father has been given full authority to plan at least one completely spontaneous, potentially impractical adventure. I don't know what he'll choose. It might be a trip to that hazelnut spread place, or it might be something entirely different. It might involve a 5-hour drive, or it might be something in their own backyard. The destination doesn't matter. What matters is that I'll say yes without hesitation, without calculating the practical value, without weighing the efficiency of the experience. Because I understand now what my father knew all along, that life's most precious moments rarely make practical sense. That connection flourishes in spontaneity, in shared experiences, in the willingness to step outside the lines of our carefully constructed schedules. I understand now that sometimes a 5-hour journey for what amounts to a jar of Nutella isn't about the spread at all. It's about the conversation in the car, the laughter at wrong turns, the shared anticipation, the memory created. It's about being present with the people you love, even when, especially when, it makes no practical sense to do so. I can't go back and change my decision that day. I can't undo the hurt I caused or reclaim the opportunity that was lost. But I can move forward with this new understanding, this recalibrated perspective on what truly matters. And perhaps someday, when I have children of my own, I'll wake them up at 3 a.m. to watch meteor showers. I'll take sudden detours on family road trips because I spotted something interesting in the distance. I'll suggest 5-hour journeys for seemingly trivial rewards. And when they roll their eyes and point out how impractical these adventures are, I'll simply smile and say, trust me. One day, these will be the moments you remember most. Because now I know the truth that took me too long to learn. The weight of our lives is measured not in tasks completed or efficiency achieved, but in connections forged, in joy experienced, in love expressed, often in the most impractical of ways.